have experienced a little increase in traffic around our valley in the last few weeks. We've had some festivals. I'm ready for the heat to come back, because when the heat comes back, that means that I get my roads back. And I get the restaurants back. How many of you guys are year-rounders? Come on, year-rounders, that's right. We like the heat, don't we? And it's interesting. It's interesting, speaking of traffic, that, everybody that's driving slower than you is a moron, and everybody that's driving faster than you is a maniac. Have you ever noticed that? You just have that craziness as you're driving. But if everybody just drove like me, it would be perfect. Life would be surreal. It'd be awesome. Well, we've been walking through a series that we're calling How to Have That Really, Really, Really Difficult Conversation. And, you may ask, why are we doing a series like this? Why are we committing so much time to just dealing with relationships and dealing with conflict and resolution and clarifying discussions that we may need to have? And the reason is because we can gauge with pretty good estimation that if you are, your marriage is going to be healthy, and the health of your marriage is gauged by how quickly you can talk about critical issues and resolve them. Your business and your business relationship, you could gauge the productivity of your office and your team pretty much based upon how quickly you can engage in critical conversations and resolve them. Even in a church, you could gauge the health of a church by how easily we can engage in critical conversations and resolve them. Whoever you're living life with, in relationship, we need to know how to navigate through these difficult conversations. How do we confront issues and yet be gentle on the person? In fact, Micah in chapter 6, verse 8 says, "And what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with our God." We love truth. We love justice. We talk about right and wrong all the time in churches and anytime we open up the Bible. It's important. In relationships, it's important to talk about what's true and what's just. But to also love mercy, to always want to give grace to the other person, to extend to them the benefit of a doubt, and to walk humbly with our God. Last week, we talked about walking humbly and how Jesus himself said when we're confronting issues in relationships or when talking about judging other people's behavior or what's right and wrong, it's very important that first we take the plank out of our own eye, and then we can see clearly to take the speck out of someone else's eye. What's important is that when we are judging actions, that we're not treating others with a harsher judgment than we would treat ourselves. Jesus calls that an hypocrisy. It really is true. We tend to more easily look at ourselves much easier than we do other people. And we give ourselves the benefit of the doubt. We let ourselves off the hook. And we said, well, I did that because of this and this and that and the other, but we would not extend to somebody else that same grace. But Ephesians chapter 4, verse 15 says, instead, when we speak the truth in love, we will grow in every way more and more like Jesus, who is the head of the body, the church. So if Jesus is the head of this church, this community of faith, we should look more and more like him. And we do that by committing to have difficult conversations in truth and in love, both. Sometimes we think we have to choose between two worlds. We want a world full of connections and yet no truth, where you appease people to be their lowest and least. Or perhaps you live in a world with all truth and no connections. You've alienated everybody in your life, but you're living in that world, that maybe has integrity. Maybe you have what's truth, but there's very, very little love and grace in those relationships. We need to have both. And when you think about this idea of navigating the tension between truth and grace, think about Jesus. Think about him and his example. You would never look at Jesus and say, well, he minced words and, he didn't really stand for what is true and he had difficulty confronting people. He did that almost effortlessly, it seems. Did it appropriately in every single circumstance. But you also look at Jesus and you say, well, here's a person of extraordinary grace, amazing mercy. He navigated this tension between truth and grace perfectly. And last week we talked about the humility and the attitude that we need to have even before we engage in this conversation, and that was part 1. And today we're going to look at part 2, even before you have the conversation and the difficult confrontations of your life. What else do you need to do? And I think one of the things you need to do is to clarify really what is true. What is something that you want? And so in your bulletin, there are some notes. And we're going to talk through real quickly a lot of different details that those notes are going to really help you. And I put as much detail as I could fit on those little pages of notes because this is a roadmap for you as you engage in some of these conversations. You know, confrontation, the root word in Latin, just means to turn and face somebody. And really, that's the heart of God, that we need to turn and face people. The opposite of that would be to turn and point our back to people and bury our head in the sand, and too often, that is what we do. We need to open our heart to one another. 2 Corinthians chapter 6 says, we have spoken freely to you, Corinthians, and opened wide our hearts to you. We're not withholding our affection from you, but you are withholding yours from us. As a fair exchange, I speak to you as my children. Open wide your hearts also. Isn't this the heart of God for relationships? That we open wide our heart. That we're not concealing secret feelings and secret attitudes that we may have towards somebody else. We're not walking in that level of what I might even call deception. But we're walking in truth, and our hearts are open. And you may say, well, Pastor Craig, if I open my heart, there's a potential that I might get hurt. And I would say, yeah, there is. But the benefits of true, authentic relationship far outweigh the potential of any kind of hurt or pain or discomfort. And when those things come up, handling those in the right way is so, so very important. You know, I once heard a story of this family who went to the amusement park. Has anyone gone to, not Disneyland, but Disney World in Orlando? You know, it's like 95 degrees, 95% humidity. You have to take this ferry across the lake to get out. And as much as people wanted to get in, they wanted to get out worse, you know. And I remember standing there with Alexis and different things. Well, this family had spent all day at the amusement park. They were coming home, and the girls, 2 small girls, needed to use the bathroom. And so they get back to the hotel, and they both run in, and they both arrive at the bathroom door about the same time, and they're like, I'm going to go first. And the other girl says, no, I'm going to go first. The other girl says, well, I have to go worse than you have to go. And the other girl says, how do you know you have to go worse than I have to go? I'm going to use the bathroom first. You're always thinking about yourself. And the parents, who thought they were really wise at that point in time, walked up and said, you know, we're going to let you girls figure this out. This is a good learning moment for our family. And so for the next 15 minutes, I'm going to go first. No, I'm going to go first. I'm going to go first. And it was 15 minutes later, these girls finally went in. One shoved their way into the bathroom and got the door closed, flushes the toilet. The other one goes in as quickly as they can. They come out, and the parents are like, it took you 15 minutes to figure out who's going to use the bathroom first, and you're both sitting there in pain, standing like this. What happened? And they're like, well, she always thinks about herself, and the other daughter says, you are always thinking about yourself. And it's interesting because it's a great metaphor for what happens a lot of times in our conversations, that we don't even clarify what it is that we truly, truly want. We haven't clarified the truth that we actually want to address. You ever had those conversations where it all starts out and says, how come you didn't pick up the kids from school? Well, I thought you were going to pick them up if you would just communicate. Remember that time you didn't communicate very well? Yeah, I remember that you told me to do this, and then you didn't do it, and you don't follow through with what you're talking about. Yeah, and you lost the credit cards, and yeah, you didn't take the car in for service, and I got stranded somewhere 5 years ago, and remember that time, and 30 minutes of this conversation goes back and forth, and then about, at the end, you're looking back and you say, what started this conversation? You can't even remember what the argument was. Have you ever been there? And a lot of times it's simply because we didn't clarify what the real issue is, what we wanted out of the relationships. Rather, we just wanted to win. You just want to win. Because if you win, that means the other person lost and you didn't lose, and you've showed yourself, you're in control, and you're the authority. Or maybe you want to be right. This is a big one for me and a lot of people. You just want to be right. You want it to be fair. You want it to be just. You want the person to acknowledge that they were wrong and see the truth of this argument that you're making. Or maybe, you just want to punish them. Because if you punish them hard enough, that means that they're not going to do it again. And so you're going to make it painful on them. Or perhaps you never even really engage in the conversation and you just want to keep the peace. And so the minute it starts getting tense, you're like, oh, no, you're right. No, never mind. And you just back out of it. And the whole time you're seething inside because something is lying dormant inside of your own heart and life. I think a lot of times we just need a lot more specificity about what it is that we're trying to do. And asking these questions really help. And you can look on your notes as well as look on the screen because, like I said, this is a roadmap, so we're going to go through this really quickly. But you need to ask, what do I want for myself? What it is that I really, really want for myself? What do I want for the other person? Am I working for their good? Am I working for their ultimate positive outcome? What do I want for the relationship? What do I want to change in this dynamic that I think will help us moving forward? And finally, what do I really want for impacted third parties, like kids or people that are on the team in a business or people that are extended members of your family? What do I want for them? And asking these questions, I think, really begins to drill down what it is that we truly, truly want. Your daughter may have missed curfew again, and she came in late, and you could address the curfew issue, but really what the issue is perhaps she lied to you, or perhaps there's an issue of disrespect, or perhaps there's something else going on deep down inside. And we need to know what it is that we're really trying to change in the outcome. Here's a creative way to do this, and I think this really helps me identify what the issue actually is that I need to address. I need to ask myself, what do I really, really want? And what do I don't want? What is it that I don't want to have happen? And then I need to put those statements together and put an and in between them. And it reframes the whole issue in a way that helps me clarify exactly what the issue is, and engages my mind and engages my heart and takes me to a place of prayer where I need to drop on my knees and say, God, give me wisdom of how to do this. Let me give you some examples of what this might look like. So you need to ask, is there a way to address to your friends some real concerns and not offend them? What I don't want is I don't want to offend them, but I want to address some real concerns. And so how do I do that? How do I navigate through this tension between truth and grace? Is there a way to talk to my neighbor about their annoying behavior and not come across as self-righteous or demanding? Kind of between a rock and a hard place, but most people would say when they put it together in a complex problem, suddenly some solutions begin to emerge and how to articulate this and strategies moving forward. Is there a way to talk to your child about their bad grades and not discourage or embitter them? Is there a way to talk to your boss about them micromanaging you and not come across as disrespectful? Is there a way to talk to somebody about their gossiping about you and not alienate them or make it feel weird moving forward? I think when we put this together in a complex problem and engage our mind and our heart about how do I navigate through something that potentially could be extremely beneficial, but at the same time could potentially be destructive in the relationship. We need to get specific. And this sometimes is hard. Once heard of a counselor